As we look beyond just simply implementing the system of quality management, what things should firms be expecting to do there? Is it going to be a one-time exercise to create it and then pick it up in 12 months' time and just have a look at how that went? Or is this going to be a little bit more immersive this time around?
Well, as a minimum, you have to look at it at least once a year. And the person in charge, right, with that overall responsibility has to be the most senior person in the partnership. They can't delegate that. They can't say, well, I'm not really an audit person, or, I haven't really got the technical knowledge. The top person, or if there's a board, if it's a bigger firm and it's sort of got a board in charge, they have to have the overall responsibility. But as you say, they can't do all of it. So you can delegate various areas to named people as to, okay, you're going to deal with that. And obviously, if you've got software, then you can put it in the system so that they can flag out, oh, what am I responsible for? If you're in a spreadsheet, you can filter, oh, what am I responsible for? So you can link through that. If we look at, how do we make sure that it's still working or that it is working? How do we do that monitoring and review? And we've still got all of those monitoring requirements that we had in the old standards, if you like. So you're going to expect, on the one hand, things which will seem quite familiar. So cold reviews of files. However, not only are you going to have cold reviews of files, but there are significantly beefed up requirements in terms of showing that you've dealt with the points that you found and that you've, that you track it. So again, tracking is something which software can help with enormously. You can do it on a spreadsheet. So, you can write, okay, picked up this point, when did it get dealt with? Has it been dealt with? Let's review it again next year and come back to it. So you're going to still need to do cold file reviews. However, you've also got another direct requirement, which is root cause analysis on what they call deficiencies. So things which are really not working in the system. If you find it's really not working, you have to do a root cause analysis. But what this whole system gives us the possibility to do is to say, well, I'd rather find out before it goes wrong that it is maybe going wrong. So if one of your risks is not enough time is spent on planning to make sure that it's done properly, and the audit team rushes into things, just does what was done last year because they haven't considered new risks and whatever, you could, if you've got everything software based, you could say, if planning is more than 10% less of budgeted time, a red flag goes up for somebody who's monitoring the whole thing to say, this audit, they seem to have moved on to field work and they've only spent 2 hours on planning. So all of a sudden you turn what is a very slow, if you like, retrospective system, because you've got to wait for the audit to be done, then you wait a bit longer, then you do a cold file review, then you work out what that says, and you're months after the fact to, oh, let's catch this now, let's catch this live and pick up on things. So if you can have a really careful think about your responses to say, well, I see this going wrong live, forms not being filled in, adequate amounts of time not being spent, things being done in the wrong order, things being done by the wrong person, you can have flags come up live in your system. And how much more powerful is that? That's what you'd want on your airline, isn't it? You don't want to discover after the fact what went wrong. You want something to be coming up in the cockpit telling the pilot, you've got a problem. What you need to do now is this in order to avoid the problem, not just find out after that it happened.
I think that analogy is really, really strong. And I know that the airline industry is often cited as being an industry that's really got this right, particularly in some of the collaborative work that they do to be able to learn from one another and things like that. And I think that's an opportunity where clearly that industry has embraced technology to be able to do that. The black box is something everyone will be fundamentally aware of, but the level of collaboration in terms of sharing those insights and those expertise is across the profession. So that ability to use technology to be able to compare and contrast and learn from each other, I think is something that the profession needs to take very seriously, in terms of that we can implement these standards individually, firm by firm, and that is going to improve quality, but it isn't necessarily going to improve the profession as a whole. And I think that airline analogy is something we can take a little bit further, Julia, because you're absolutely right. We don't wait for an airplane to crash and then do a root cause analysis on the airplane crashing to work out why did it crash. And we don't take, 3 to 6 months for that to happen. Absolutely, if an airplane crashes, we do all of that work, right? But think about all of the other things that are doing that. That is not the sole way that the airlines learn from things, is by things going wrong and then working out what happened. And I think the standards naturally point to, you call them cold file reviews, standards like necessarily completed engagement inspections, whatever terminology you want to talk about. Basically, the audit's done, the opinion is signed, and then we pick up a file and we go, well, did we actually get the right answer there? Did we do enough work for that? And if we didn't, let's work out why we didn't. Now, that feedback loop, from designing the system of quality management to executing engagement to finishing it, signing the opinion, and then doing the review and then doing the root cause analysis, is a lot of time. Now, I would estimate it's probably going to be more than a year potentially that it would take for us to get back from that exercise. Now, that wouldn't happen in the airline industry. The airline industry would have not just the pilot and the cockpit and the dashboard giving them real-time insights on that one flight that they're doing, or in this analogy, the one audit that they're doing. They've got all of the metrics, the measurements. Our language, it would be audit quality indicators as to how is that engagement being performed live by the pilot or the responsible individual, the audit partner, if you like. But there's also a central oversight of all of the flights that are going on across that airline, across that airport, across the broader spectrum. And that's somebody sat in a control tower who's monitoring everything that's going on across that. And I think in that analogy, I would be sat there saying, right, well, it might not be the managing partner, but it's somebody who's got that technical oversight centrally across the firm. How can we have somebody who's actually scanning across all of the engagements? And in your example you shared there, identifying this particular flight, this particular audit is not going correctly. It is going to end in a crash. It's going to end in the audit opinion being incorrect. And so I want to jump in now and make the correction that's needed. Perhaps that team needs a bit more support. Perhaps they just don't understand exactly what they're trying to do right now, or necessarily the importance of what the effort is.
Yeah.
And I can now get in and address that and make sure we get to the right audit opinion. So for me, audit quality indicators is something that isn't necessarily drawn out in the standard, but is something that everybody is kind of well versed in the profession that audit quality indicators are a good idea. I think the challenge that I've seen from firms trying to implement them is nobody kind of really knew what the purpose of implementing them was, other than the general, they will improve quality. And I think that now there's the opportunity to look beyond completed file inspections. What about in-flight file inspections? What about audit quality indicators that can give us the opportunity to correct something before it's wrong, rather than trying to do all the root cause? And it's more efficient, to be quite frank, as well, than trying to unpick all of the root cause. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely more efficient than doing root cause analysis, because once you get into that, oh gosh, something really didn't go well, and you've got to dig around. And for those that are not familiar with root cause analysis, I'm afraid you'll have to be soon. And you really need to dig to what was the root cause. So software failure, people didn't understand what they were doing, and so on and so forth. But how much better to be able to identify things that might likely go wrong. That's your risk identification sort of piece. And then say, well, actually, we can track whether that looks like it's going wrong. So as I said, things like how much time is spent on planning, things being done in the right order, the wrong order, and so on. Now, you need to be imaginative, because you need to relate it to how your firm operates and what your most likely risks are. And those will change over time. So you'll need to shift your quality indicators, because when you've got things like a new standard coming in, then obviously that might be a particular risk area for a number of years whilst people get the hang of it, if we're honest. So you can set those flags, and the techie person, the person with operational responsibility, is what the phrase that the standards use, operational responsibility for their system of quality management. They can live track and see that it's not quite going right. And I think the other thing, I've talked about the profession-wide approach as well, is that to a certain extent, we need to change the culture in the profession, not just to a quality culture, which the standard, as you can imagine, emphasizes in a number of places through the standard. We need a culture where everybody sees their responsibility to do a quality piece of work. Everybody understands that they should do a quality piece of work. But also, to have a quality culture, you need to accept that you make mistakes. So you need not to come down on people with a ton of bricks and say, oh my goodness, you didn't do it. So if you're intervening, because you've seen an audit quality indicator go, red flag status, and you intervene, you need not to be, bashing them on the head saying, you didn't do it like you were supposed to. You're like, well, why are you not doing it like it says? And as you gave some examples, actually they need a bit more support. They're not really up to the job from maybe they're not experienced enough. Maybe somebody's gone off sick and they've been trying to cover, without getting extra staff, and actually they just haven't got enough resource. So that intervention needs to be sensitive to what we're trying to achieve is quality. We're not trying to tell people off, because also people won't admit, and they'll find ways around the system, dare I say it. If they think, okay, what needs to be seen is X, Y, and Z, they'll find ways to do that if they think they're going to get into trouble. And, we start to see this, unfortunately, in some of the cases that come out, in the public arena. And what we want is a culture where people are always happy to say, do you know, I think something's going wrong here. And that will further enhance our system of quality management. But coupled with their in-flight AQIs, you just build, hopefully, a stronger and stronger system of quality management. So you just really make some practical differences to the level of quality seen in the audit profession.